Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving right into a decision that honestly affects millions of people. What to do about chronic back pain, and specifically whether to go for surgery.
So let's get right to it. For anyone dealing with chronic back and leg pain from something called lumbar spinal stenosis, you're facing a huge question. Is surgery the answer? Is it a quick fix, or is it a lasting cure? To figure this out, we're going to frame it like a race. Surgery as the all-out sprint versus non-surgical care as the long game, the marathon. Okay, so before we can even get into the race, we've got to understand what we're dealing with. Let's talk about that pinch in your back. So, picture your spinal canal, right? It's like a tunnel that your nerves run through. But with lumbar spinal stenosis, or LSS, that tunnel starts to get narrower, usually just from the wear and tear of life. And when it narrows, it can start to pinch the nerves inside. And that pinch, well, that's what causes all the pain, especially down the legs. It's one of the top reasons older adults end up at the doctor for back pain, and it puts them at a real crossroads. Go for the immediate fix with surgery, or try a more conservative route first.
All right, let's talk about the sprint. This is where we look at the short-term results. And honestly, this is where surgery comes flying out of the blocks, taking a huge early lead.
But here's something that's really important to understand. The two groups, the people who get surgery and the people who don't, they don't even start from the same place. It's not a fair race from the get-go. Research shows us that the folks who choose surgery, they're usually in way more pain to begin with. They have higher disability scores. They're essentially starting the race way behind the starting line.
But here's the crazy part. Even though they start worse off, look at what happens. The surgical group improves so much faster. Within just 6 months, their disability scores drop by almost double what the non-surgical group sees. It's this incredible, dramatic catch-up.
And that number right there, that really just hammers home the short-term power of surgery. By the time you hit the 1-year mark, patients who had the operation were 1.77 times more likely to say they felt a real, meaningful improvement in their lives. That's a huge difference.
So, what does this all mean? It means in that first lap, that first year, surgery is absolutely the front runner. I mean, look at the numbers. Almost 75% of surgical patients get significant relief. Compare that to less than half of the other group. There's no question. In the sprint, surgery wins. Hands down.
But, and this is a big but, what happens after that first year? Winning the 100-meter dash doesn't mean you're going to win the marathon. So now let's zoom out and take the long-term view.
And what's so great about the studies we're looking at is they didn't just stop the clock at 1 year. Nope, they kept following these patients for 5, 7, some even for 10 years to see what really happens over time. And this is where the story gets really interesting.
Okay, so this is where the whole race dynamic starts to shift. That huge, dramatic lead that the surgery group had in the beginning, well, over time, it starts to shrink. The non-surgical group, they're improving more slowly, more steadily, and they start closing the gap.
The researchers even have a specific term for this. They call it outcome convergence. It's a fancy way of saying that over a long enough time, the results for both groups start to look more and more alike. The marathon runners are catching up.
So what does that actually look like, this convergence? Well, for that really specific leg pain from the pinched nerve, surgery's benefit tends to stick around. That's good news. But when you look at overall disability and day-to-day function, the two groups become very similar. Now, it's also worth noting that about a third of the non-surgical folks eventually do decide to cross over and get the surgery. And on the flip side, about 12% of the people who got surgery in the first place ended up needing a second one later on. So yeah, it gets a lot more complicated than it seems at first.
Okay, so if the finish line looks pretty similar for both groups in the long run, how on earth are you supposed to decide which path to take? Well, that brings us to the next part, choosing your race. This isn't about finding the one best option, it's about finding the option that's best for you.
And luckily, research gives us some pretty good clues about who might benefit most from that surgery sprint. For example, if your pain is mostly shooting down your legs, not just in your back, or if your symptoms haven't been around for too long, and if you're generally younger and not dealing with depression, the studies suggest you're more likely to have a great outcome from surgery. See how this turns from a general question into a really personal one?
But that still leaves us with that nagging question from the beginning, right? Remember how the surgical group started out in worse shape? It makes you wonder, what would happen if the race actually started fair?
Well, one study did exactly that. They used this really smart statistical method to essentially create two perfectly matched groups.
They found people who were virtually identical. Same age, same severity of symptoms, everything. They basically removed that starting line bias and created a truly fair race.
And the result? It was pretty incredible. When you make the race fair, when you compare people who are starting from the exact same point, guess what? After 1 year, intensive, supervised physical therapy had pretty much the same results as surgery. That supposed frontrunner? Suddenly not so far ahead when the starting blocks are even.
So let's pull all of this together. What is the ultimate takeaway here? I think it's that this isn't about winning a race against anyone else. It's about figuring out the best way for you to cross your own finish line, whatever that looks like.
And it all comes back to our metaphor. Surgery really is the sprint. You get faster, more significant relief right away, but it comes with real surgical risks like infections or dural tears. And non-surgical care? That's the marathon. It's a slower, steadier approach. The risks are different, maybe medication side effects, but it can get you to a very, very similar finish line. It just takes a different path to get there.
So what can you do with all this information? Well, here's your game plan for when you talk to your doctor. You can walk in there prepared. Think about these things. 1. Define your pain. Is it mostly back, or is it that leg pain? 2. What are your goals? What do you actually want to get back to doing? 3. What's your timeline? How fast do you need to feel better? And 4. Understand your own profile. Do you have those factors that seem to favor one path over the other?
Because in the end, the research doesn't point to one single winner. There is no magic bullet here. What it does, and what's so powerful about it, is it gives you the information to work with your doctor to find the best treatment for you, for your body, for your goals, for your life.
And so we'll leave you with this question to think about. Now that you know the dynamics of the race, the quick, powerful start of the sprint versus the slow, steady pace of the marathon, which race would you choose to run?